Greetings, friends and friends. It's your buddy Adam here from Funinstallers, and today I'm going to be your personal guide, African Safari, your guide to Dungeon World, the RPG that everybody should be talking about. And today we're talking about the basic moves that you need to know to be able to pretty much do everything in the game. Alright, so hopping right into it, number one is hack and slash. This will be how most combatants will be doing most of their damage. So for instance, this stat is specifically based on strength. There are some rules later where you can also use your dexterity, but for the most part this is a strength roll. So anything that requires you getting up and close and personal with an enemy and swinging at them with a halberd or an axe or your fist or anything in between, typically that'll be hack and slash. You roll 2d6s. If you get a 10 plus, you get to land your hit, and you could also choose to do extra damage to risk more of your skin, or you can choose to get away scot-free and hit your attack and not get any sort of retaliation. Now if you roll a 7 through 9, you and the monster or whomever you're fighting just exchange blows. You hit them, they hit you. If you roll below that, you fail, brother. You fail hard. But you get experience points for failing, so even when you lose, you win, so that's cool. Up next is the Folly Move. Now this one is typically when you are attacking from a range. Now more often than not this is from a bow and arrow, but there are some other weapons that you can use that also count as a volley. Pretty much anything that is ranged more often than not. Now how this one works is you roll those 2d6s, and if you get a 10 plus, you're completely successful, you land your attack, no problem. If you get a 7 through 9, there's a couple of penalties that you get to pick from. So you get to pick, I think there are 3 of them. So one of them is you do less damage, another one is you have to get in closer to get a better shot, which could put you in some type of danger. The GM makes that decision. Or lastly, I believe if you get a 7 through 9, you do your damage, but you have to waste a lot more shots to do it. Like you're just pinging arrows or whatever, and you lose some of your ammunition from doing it. And again, if you roll a 6 or less, you fail. You failed hardcore, and your GM will tell you what happens after that. Because the GM has their own list of moves that they pick from depending on what you do and don't do. So that's a whole other video for another time. But right now, that's what volley is. Let's move on to the next one, baby. This next one is called Parlay. And so Parlay is essentially like what you use when you're talking and trying to get something from somebody, but maybe they're not completely willing to tell you what you want to know, or maybe they're resisting for some reason, or maybe you're interrogating somebody after you've captured them, or anything in between, or maybe somebody who's also trying to manipulate you. So this is typically when you want to manipulate somebody else. So a parlay is essentially that. You're trying to get something from someone else. Now more often than not, when you're doing a parlay, that means that if you want something from them, more often than not, they want something from you. So you roll your 2d6s. If you get a 10 plus, they'll do what you ask them to do, but you have to make them a promise that you'll do what you ask for them. Now you have to use that through your own RPing to make them believe that. But that's the idea, is you roll that 10 plus, you succeed, you just have to work it into your narrative. Now if you get a 7 through 9, you have to make them a promise, and you have to show them concrete proof that you will complete your promise right then and there. You have to show them some sort of evidence, or maybe do a part of it now just to show them that you really mean it. So this can be a little bit blurry sometimes. So essentially you could do the parlay, roll a 10 plus, succeed, and completely be BSing and not do anything for them when you're done. But you make them like, yeah sure, I'll go and ask that girl out for you or whatever it is, but then never do it once they tell you what you want to know. Now on the other side, if you roll that 7 through 9, then you're like, alright, well I'll go and just like, I'll talk you up a little bit to her right now, but then when I come back I'll like ask her out. I don't know, I'm just making something up. But you know, on a 6 through 1 you fail. Well, I guess you can't really get a 1. A 6 through 2 you fail miserably, and they're just like, man, I don't want to do any business with you, shove off. This next one is probably the most versatile of all the moves that you have, and it's called Defied Danger. Now, if you actually look at the move, the Dungeon World book has this all printed out. You can also print out the sheets, or even just look it up on Google. But you can essentially, depending on the situation, use any of your stats to get your way out of a situation. So for instance, if you're strong in charisma, it has to make sense, by the way. So if you're strong in charisma, and you know someone's about to lay into you, and they're about to attack you, ordinarily that'd be hack and slash. We could say, alright, I'm going to defy danger, I'm going to try to talk my way out of this, and you roll for it. As long as it narratively makes sense to the GM, you can try to do that. If that's one of your strongest stats, you want to find reasons to use it. But, you know, if your mouth is gagged, and you're blindfolded, and someone's about to stab you, you're not really going to be able to talk your way out of that danger because, you know, you can't talk. So you'd have to use one of your other stats to figure that out. Or if you're trying to run into battle and save someone, or maybe run through an ogre's legs to to get to the other side of a door. Charming them isn't really going to work, so you have to pick one of the other stats, and the GM and the group can work on that together to agree on it, and that's how you get out of danger. So if you roll a 10 plus, you succeed. Everything you intended to do happens, and if you roll a 7 through 9, the GM will give you some different consequences based on the success that you have, and once again, a 6 and below, you fail. This is a really interesting one. This is going to be a go-to one for a lot of the crazy stuff that you probably want to do, so definitely keep your eye on this one. Again, this one is called Defied Danger, and I tell you, you will be using it a lot. This next one is called Defend. Now, it's exactly what it sounds like. You choose, instead of going to attack someone, you choose to stand in defense of someone or of something. Could be you're defending a home, could be you're defending a child, could be you're defending one of your other players. Could be anything in between. It just like it has to be known that that is what you're doing. I am defending this thing for X amount of time. And so then you roll, and if you get a 10 plus, you get to pick 3 items from, or 3 choices from this list of things that you can do. Some of which include you have to damage that someone or something might take. You do your level's worth of damage to that thing to maybe take them down, or you redirect the attack from them to you, or vice versa, just depending on what you're trying to do. And anything in between like that. And you can also make up a couple other extra things. You might not say something that's exactly on the list, but your GM will kind of figure out which one fits that the most. And then you'll just keep going from there. And on a 7 through 9, you get to pick one. And then on a 6 or less, you're not quite successful, and your GM will take some sort of move against you. Again, and that's something for them to figure out. But Defend is really nice. And I mentioned this in a previous video. This one is especially nice for if you're trying to fulfill some type of bond. I mentioned in the last video about Dungeon World about how if you have a bond with somebody and you owe them your life, you might use your defend action, even though you want to go hack and slash, to help them out, because then at the end of the battle you can say, hey, we're even, bond completed, experience rewarded. So it's pretty nice. As you can see, this all is pretty cut and dry. It's all on one sheet of paper. You can look at it very easily, figure out what moves do what, and then just do it. I will say that if you're just looking for a game that's just wacky, then you're going to be missing out on a lot of fun stuff in Dungeon World. Alright, this next one is called Discern Realities, and for those of you who have played Dungeons & Dragons, this one will feel a lot more like a perception check. So it kind of gives you the ability to roll with your wisdom to figure out something that's going on in the world right now, something that's around you, or something that is about to happen. So if you roll high enough, you can pick 3 items from a list, 3 choices, that you ask your GM directly, and they give you an answer based on the lore around you and the story. They don't just tell you everything straight out, but they'll give you narratively a reason of why you would know these things. And you get to ask the questions. It's pretty laid out, very straightforward. You don't have to think of anything clever. You just tell them what you want to know. And 7 through 9, you get to pick 1 choice, and then on a 6 through 2, you apparently you're missing everything, and there's not a whole lot that you can learn from the situation, and the GM will usually make some move based on that. So this is also going to be one that you go to a lot when you're trying to figure out your surroundings. So yeah, and if you haven't played Dungeons & Dragons before and you're trying to get into it, this is a great way to get used to that concept of using your stats to figure out what's going on in the world. And again, I said, just because these have different names, for those of you who play Dungeons & Dragons, doesn't mean this is going to be a hard transition. If anything, this should be a lot easier because there's a lot less that you have to remember. This next one is probably one of my favorites. It gets overlooked once in a while. It's called Spout Lore. And this is one where you use your intelligence to talk more about what you know in the world. But this is also a conversation between you and the GM. So if you say, I want to spout lore, you roll your 2 6-sided dice and you roll a 10 plus. So you ask the GM something about, how would you know this? What is this? Something about the world, something about your situation that you would have knowledge of. And so the GM will give you that and will tell you what you want to know, but this is where I think it's really fun, is you get to creatively come up with why you would know those things. Like, even if at the time you didn't know why you would know that, you would say, oh, this is why. And so what that does is builds the world later. And I can't tell you how many times, even so far, after just starting to play it, where that has given me ideas for how I can expand the world. Somebody might say, oh, you know what, on an adventure I was having last year, I managed to I ran into a keep that I witnessed these symbols on the wall, so that's how I would know what these are. And that keep could come up later in the story, so it's kind of cool if you and your GM are very creative. You can even approach your GM after the fact and say, hey, I didn't know that about myself. can we work that into my story when you get to it? It's a really fun way to build a world, and I think that's another part of the charm of this game, is that you're always working together to build the world. You're not just relying on the game master, who really, as a game master, we don't do a whole lot. We make like a really defined outline, which I'm going to go over later in another video, and then after that, the players fill in the gaps, and it's a lot of fun. Now this last one is called Aid or Interfere. Now, this one ties completely into those bonds that I mentioned earlier, where you might defend somebody in battle, and that might help fulfill the bond. But there are other ways that you can use your bond to either help or to hurt the people you are bonded with. So if you're really playing your character and someone hurt you, and that's how you know them, maybe you don't owe them anything. Maybe you're bonded to them because they hurt you, and you're trying to get revenge on them, or you're trying to even the score, or I guess, which is the same thing as getting revenge on them. Or if your whole thing is just to torture them and to annoy them until, you know, something happens. Again, like, I don't have a ton made up right now, but the idea is that you can roll what we call plus bond, and if you roll high enough, you can either add a +1 or a +2 or a -1 or a -2 to something that that character is doing. So maybe they're trying to talk their way out of a situation, or maybe they're trying to flirt with somebody at the bar, and you're all like, "Ooh, I want to roll bond," and you go up there and they're like hitting on this girl or this guy, and then you say, "Oh yeah, you know, this person's really cool. You should totally go out with them, as long as you don't mind them having herpes," and just walk away. And like, you know, that could be like, if you roll high enough, that could be the successes where you detrimented them. Or if you're trying to help them because that's your whole thing, you would do something else, like, "Oh yeah, you should totally go out with them. They're like really good in the sack." You know, and you add more to their role if they're trying to manipulate somebody or get something that they want. So it's kind of a cool dynamic. Again, it makes you want to play more to your character, and it makes you more interested in what the other players are doing. Because I can't tell you how many players I've played with who focus a little bit too much on what they're doing, and they don't care enough about what everybody else is doing, to the point where it just becomes like them playing their own little RPG where there happen to be other people in the room. So this is a really good way to always keep everybody involved with each other's stories and caring about what they're doing. Not to say that Dungeons & Dragons doesn't have that, but again, this whole game is to create a big collaborative effort, and I hope that everybody will start to see that. So yeah, that's aiding and interfering right there, baby. So those are the basic moves. There are a lot more moves. There are what we call advanced moves, and there are additional moves that you have on another sheet about things that usually you do outside of battle that are pretty detailed on the character sheets and in the book that I may go over later, but they're not anything that requires immediate knowledge. You can kind of do it at your own leisure. But the basic moves here are something that kind of happens on the fly, so it's really nice to have a good understanding of them. If I wasn't clear enough, please let me know. If you're interested in the game, please let me know about that too. I can certainly make some more videos about this, as I already planned to, but if there's anything, maybe you're already playing the game and you need some help, certainly give me some ideas and I will address them as I can. I'm falling in love with this game very quickly. It's a lot of fun, and it's so fast and loose. It just goes by so quickly. It's easy for one-shots, pick-up games, and everything in between. I taught my 9-year-old niece how to do this just last weekend, and she was having a blast putting a skeleton in an armbar, which was the cutest and the funniest thing I've ever heard her say. So that's pretty much it. And again, as I always like to make sure, please, I hope you're taking care of yourself. Honestly, I know it's easy to get down on yourself a lot when things aren't going your way. Maybe you haven't succeeded at something that you really wanted to. As I've said before, it's okay to fail. Just like here in Dungeon World, failing gives you experience, and that's actually very true for life. And you know, the more you fail, the more you learn. So as long as you're not trying to fail on purpose, but you gotta take risks sometimes. So if you failed, that's not always a bad thing. That's actually a good thing, because you're learning something. Just take stock of what you did and what you didn't do, and go back at it. It's what I'm doing now. You can do the same. I hope you're taking care of yourself. Take care of this. Take care of this. And I'll see you guys next time as your Dungeon World guide.